Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be back. I was here last year, and it's my second time in Manila. And it's just very warm to always be back. How many of you were here last year? How many of you were at my talk last year? Oh, great. So you can come up and talk about LPI, I guess. Okay. So thank you for the introduction. I guess in my bio, you don't hear anything about technical. So just to give you a little background of myself, I'm not a technical person. The reason why I'm here today is really to share with you the trend of Linux. I represent the Linux Professional Institute. We are a certification organization based in Canada. My job is really to let you know what is out there and how can you be part of the Linux movement in the world that we see. And it's very exciting. So thank you for being here at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so let's get started. So today, I'm going to talk to you about the open source world, okay? Share with you some of the data that we have seen in Linux adoption. Also, what are the opportunities here in the Philippines? What are the jobs, the future? I know some of you are graduating. You know, it's time to think about what you want to be. And for those of you who might just started, it's also time to think about which track you want to go to. I know you're all in IT, you know, but there are a lot of a broad spectrum of IT. So what are you looking into developing yourself while you're in school to get ready to get a job? So every year, Linux Foundation put together a lot of information. So basically, we are using Linux every day. You know, there are 850,000 Android phones, you know, in the world, and the number is increasing. It's on Linux, and as we speak, 100 of Linux phones is getting online. And then there are 700,000 TVs that are running on Linux that are being sold in the market today. A lot of financial institutions are using Linux also. 9 out of 10 world's computers is using Linux. You see Google, Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, they're all powered by Linux. So how is Linux being developed? Okay, it's not like other proprietary operating system. Linux is developed by a collaborative effort with different people in the community, companies, different places, different market. It's the largest collaborative development project in history. And since 2005, 8,000 developers from 800 companies have been contributing to the Linux. This has contributed 50 million lines of code and then only in the last couple of years, 1.5 million lines were being written. So to compare some of the books that are in the market, you know, 15,000 tags, 560,000 words, 15 million lines of code is a lot of code. But it's not just a number, it's really how quickly Linux is being developed and released. When you look at a new kernel, it comes out every 2 to 3 months. But when you look at some other operating system, it takes years to complete. So it's a very unique collaborative effort on development. It's very exciting. So I'm not going to go through more. This talks about patches and so on. You can go online and actually search more on this video and actually listen to it and, you know, get a sense of how exciting it is to be in Linux to be a Linux developer. And but with all these people doing Linux, you know, there is still a large space to grow. There's still a lot that we can do, we need to do to develop more in this area. So when we talk about open source, what is it actually? I mean, it's about source code. So we release source code and it's under a license to ensure that any changes that people make on this source code are being available for others. It protects certain rights of the original author of the code, but it also prohibits restrictions on who and how can use this code, who can see these codes. Open source software is typically created by a community of people, as you can kind of see in the video, that is really a collaborative work of different people around the world, working together in a highly collaborative and evolutionary way with the speed that we're releasing new patches and so on. It's really exciting and dynamic method of software development. When you look at the internet, open source is everywhere. From the databases, from content management, browser, it's everywhere. You're using it every day, okay? It basically is the power behind trillions of transactions that we have on the internet today. Some of the companies that are using Linux, Cisco is a very big company that is using Linux, and actually a lot of our certification holders are also CCNA holders. Why? Because there's a lot of open source component in it, and we go hand in hand. Google, okay, Google has a lot of Linux, and from time to time they also come to us and ask, what are we doing, how can they find more people who have LPI certification, so bear in mind, as well as some other companies. Amazon, we talk about Panasonic, Toyota, so on and so forth. Governments using Linux. The ICBC Bank, the biggest bank in the world, has 20,000 servers, okay? That's a lot. And then school system, look at the Russian school system, German school system. What about Philippines? Okay, I had a meeting with PhilHealth yesterday. They are actively deploying Linux, use of Linux in different areas, okay? And they're actually also going to make LPI certification as part of a requirement if you want to get a job there. So start thinking about it. University, I've talked with a lot of universities in the Philippines, and a lot of the universities are also adopting Linux in your infrastructure. So it's everywhere, okay? What is the future of Linux? When Linux Foundation also did another study, they're estimating that by 2016, 99% of Global 2000 companies would have adopted Linux open source software somewhere in the organization. This is compared to 75% in 2010. It's a big jump, and 99% is a pretty good number. Do you have the skills to support these organizations? Think about it. So what are the advantages of using open source? Better quality, higher reliability, high security, low cost, and vendor lock-in. So when we talk about better quality, all software contains bugs or errors, but open source software bugs get found 2 to 5 times faster and fixed 2 to 5 times faster. It's tested for the backbone infrastructure, and it really, with the number of transactions, the number of users that are using Linux, it really forces a lot of bugs to be discovered and fixed fast, okay? It's high security. It says with enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. With enough eyes, we will be able to find them and fix them very quickly. Especially with a lot of everyone can see the source code. A lot of people are contributing to this effort. There's no lasting backdoors, Trojans, secret sections, and it can be safely used by any company, any person, any government, any organization. Open source has no licensing cost, so comparatively, it's much cheaper to deploy open source. Business can scale without additional software costs, and this is a good part for you. We found that open source software admins actually get paid higher, okay? But less admin is needed to manage the system. So I don't have the exact data in the Philippines, but that's what we found worldwide. And vendor lock-in. All vendors have the same access to the source code. Remember, we have the source code, and people are free to under different licensing, they're free to modify the source code. And so they can't deny you of accessing any software that you're running in your business. And so there's a lot of benefits of using open source. Some of the Linux adoption trends, Linux Foundation also put out a report every year. I'm going to share with you some of the findings that they have from 2012. They surveyed 1,893 enterprises, and Linux continue to be increasing at the expense of Unix and Windows system. 84% prefer using Linux and are expanding the usage in the organization. 8 out of 10 respondents said they are adding more Linux server. Is a continuing increased trend that we see. A lot of companies are moving a lot of the data to the cloud or virtualization. A lot of information is being digitized, and that's what we call big data. With a lot of big data that is around in the world, there are 75% of the companies that really have concern, how are we going to manage all these data? And 72% share with us that they choose Linux for big data, for handling big data. We also asked them why are they using Linux. So besides the total cost of ownership is lower, the feature technical superiority, security is also one of the factors. So 78% consider Linux to be more secure than other OS, and that's why they choose to use Linux. Okay. What are some of the opportunities we see in the Philippines? Just some background, you probably know better than me. The population in the Philippines is about 103 million people. Growth rate is quite healthy, 1.8%. About 50% of you are in cities, and you have about 8.2 million internet users. Labor force is about 40 million, also ranked quite higher in the world. And your growth rate is quite healthy in this economic situation. And of course, you are doing very well in Southeast Asia. Part number 2, number 3 in Southeast Asia in terms of economy. When you look at where are these money coming from? Service, 55.7%. How we see it, you have a very fast growing BPO IT sector in the Philippines. Last year when I was here, I already talked about you guys toppling over India, being the #1 BPO market. You are the #1 call center market in 2011. You posted a 24% growth in this area and is continuing to be projecting about 20+% growth every year. Has created 638,000 jobs in 2011 and is projected to create 1.3 million jobs. How we see this is you will have more and more companies who will be building a lot of open source systems here, okay? And when they have a lot of open source system here, what do they need? They need Linux experts who can handle the network. So how can you get yourself ready, okay, to become part of this movement? The environment is basically Linux being deployed aggressively around the world and also in the Philippines. You have a BPO industry and the general Linux adoption rate is growing. So there's a lot of space. There's not a needs for system admin and developers. While you're still in school, it's very important that you develop the experience and skills that enable you to get to the job. And certification provides a very good advantage for you. So when you look at getting a job, we says OSS job here, but it's not just OSS job, any job. Some education is needed, and I think that's why you're here. You're in school to get your education, right? But what about experience? What about when you go to an interview and really showing them you have a passion of what you do? And also an independent proof of your skill set. Do you have these in your pocket? Okay. If not, it's okay. It's never too late to start. But we really need to think about how can you get the experience? How can you prove to an employer that you have a passion of doing it, you can do it very well? And how can you have an independent proof of your skill sets? So when you have all these, or at least a few of these, what the hiring manager will see when you apply for a job is you have a passion, okay? You take initiative in doing more than what is being taught in your curriculum. You like to learn, and you do that often. You can use time and resources properly. You can work with others, provide value for pays, and it's a good bet for your employer. There are different ways you can get experience. There are different organizations that you're involved with, and more often than not, they do need IT support. How can you service them? Even if it is volunteering, even if it's very low-paid job, how can you leverage that to gain experience, to tell the hiring manager that you are very interested in this, you're very good at this, and show them what you can do. But having all this is not enough. Remember, we talk about the independent proof of your skill sets. You need certifications. There's no doubt about it. Certification is as important as your college degree. Why? College degree talks about it demonstrates your academic capabilities. When you get a certification, industry certification, it really talks about the practical knowledge that you know, what you can do. And it really gives you a very good edge when you're applying for jobs. A certification is an independent third-party matrix that allow a busy, perhaps non-technical hiring manager, non-technical people like me, seeing that you have an LPI certification and that you're at least skilled to a level. Because our objectives are put online, people know what LPI certification means in terms of skill sets. When hiring manager receives the specs from the IT manager, the IT manager already knows what they want, okay? They put certification there for a reason, because they want a minimum skill sets that is being met when they hire this person. So certified professionals are easily insurable, licensable, and a good selling point to your new employers. So come and join us, grow with us. We talked a little bit about Linux Professional Institute at the beginning, but I want to spend a few minutes to talk to you more about what we do. We are an open source institute that delivers the world's leading Linux certification. We are vendor neutral, and we have a very extensive exam development process that is recognized worldwide. And we are considered to be the world's gold standard of Linux skills certification. We have, traditionally, we have 3 levels of certification, the junior level, advanced level, and senior level. For a lot of schools, we work with administrators, your IT departments in your school, to try to give you an opportunity to get at least LPIC 1 before you graduate. This year, we have spent a lot of effort in developing a new exam called Linux Essentials. It has been in discussion for the last 2 years, and this year in June, we did a lot of pilot and finalizing the Linux Essential exam in Europe, and we're bringing this to Asia now. What is Linux Essential? Linux Essential was actually demanded or requested by our partners, our school partners, because they do need a benchmark exam to evaluate or to ensure there is a minimal set of knowledge that the students know on ICT, on open source, on Linux. And a lot of schools used to put a lot of effort into developing this exam for their school. And when they see LPI, they see the value of the whole exam development process that we have. They come to us and said, can you help us to develop this benchmark exam for our students? And that's why Linux Essential is born. When people pass Linux Essential, they will get a certification of achievement. And it really tests the foundational knowledge in Linux and open source ICT. We have partnership worldwide that we want to offer, and we are talking to Y4iT in offering this training and certification on campus. So stay tuned for that. So last, just to reiterate a little bit of what we talk about, LPI, if you get Linux Essential before you graduate, that's great. Again, I highly recommend you, if you want to get into system administration or development, open source area, look at least LPI 1, okay, level 1. Or after you work for a few years, it's very important that you look at LPIC 2. Why? Because we have studied that a lot of people actually use LPIC 2 as a leverage for promotion. for career advancement. So it's probably not something that you will do now, but it's probably something that you should consider down the road. We are the gold standard for IT Linux, Linux certification. One of the very significant uniqueness of LPI certification is we are vendor neutral. So we're not tied with any distribution. We test people on the general Linux knowledge. And why tie yourself to a vendor when it's open source and when you're working in a work environment, you're really having a mixed environment, different distribution that you need to work on. We are the leading Linux certification with over 300,000 exams taken and over 100,000 exam holders around the world. We also work with different organizations in providing certification, for example, CompTIA and Novell. And we have over 300 training partners in different countries. And in the Philippines, we are working very closely with Y4iT on offering, actually, as we speak right now, they are having an exam lab at the school. And so I hope that, you know, at some point in time, I will see you at the exam lab and also be part of a training. And again, Linux Essential will be offered here. So the bottom line is having more certification than other candidates will help you to get your interview, will help you stand out from your application. And if you get your interview with your experience, okay, remember, get involved. Find your opportunity to get involved, gain experience. You will wow them with your qualification and show your passion. It's very important. And it is hard work, but being successful is also hard work.